Today's conversation is on the Kybalion by 3 initiates. This particular book was brought to awareness shortly after I discovered the word transmutation in the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. He was speaking about it in the context of transmuting energy, primarily sexual energy, transmuting into a creative expression such as a service to others, entrepreneurial success. So while sexual energy can be thought of as being a way of procreating, it is also a powerful energy that can be transmuted to a creative expression. Now, the Hermetic philosophy, if you would like to study it further, I recommend going into the foundational text of Hermeticism, which is the Corpus Hermeticum. Now, not mentioned in this particular book, but mentioned in the Corpus Hermeticum, it was stated that there were 2 gifts bestowed upon humanity. These 2 gifts were mind and speech. Mind and speech. It was also stated that these 2 gifts are equal to immortality. So in relation to that, I would like to start off our conversation with this particular passage here from the book, the Kabalion. It states, the advanced Hermetists polarize themselves at the positive pole of their being, the I am pole, rather than the pole of personality, and by refusing and denying the operation of rhythm, raises themselves above its plane of consciousness, and standing firm on their statement of being, they allow the pendulum to swing back on the lower plane without changing their polarity. This is accomplished by all individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery, whether they understand the law or not. Such person simply refuse to allow themselves to be swung back by the pendulum of mood and emotions. And by steadfastly affirming the superiority, they remain polarized on the positive pole. This is what we have been referring to as being as I am, being as you are. It states the master, of course, attains a far greater degree of proficiency because they understand the law which they are overcoming by a higher law. And by the use of their will, they attain a degree of poise and mental steadfastness, almost impossible of belief on the part of those who allow themselves to be swung backward and forward by the mental pendulum of moods and feelings. So on this foundation, I would like to explore the 7 principles. The first principle is mentalism. It states the universe is mental, held in the mind of the all. The universe is mental, held in the mind of the all. It says, let us see on their own plane of being, how does the individual create? Well, first, they may create by making something out of outside materials. But this will not do, for there are no materials outside of the all with which they may create. Well, then secondly, the individual procreates or reproduces their kind by the process of offspring. But this will not do, because the all cannot transfer or subtract a portion of itself, nor can it reproduce or multiply itself. In the first place, there would be a taking away, and in the second case, a multiplication or addition to the all. Both thoughts being an absurdity. Is there no third way in which the individual creates? Yes, there is. They create mentally, and in doing so, they use no outside materials, nor do they reproduce themselves, and yet their spirit pervades the mental creation. The all can create in no other way except mentally, without either using material or else reproducing itself. There is no escape from this conclusion of the reason, which, as we have said, agrees with the highest teachings of the Illumined. Just as you, student, may create a universe of your own in your mentality, so does the all create universes in its own mentality. So we are individual expressions of the all mind. And as the individual expression, as there's nothing to create, we can mentally imagine ourselves being a particular way, living a certain way, experiencing a particular life experience. It could be ideal, harmonious relationships, business, whatever it is that you desire. And as all things exist already in imagination, they are experienced then as physical experiences. This has been my experience to build 3 successful businesses, generate ideal, harmonious relationships, wonderful life experiences, communication skills. Notice I said generate. We'll get into that in a moment. We generate these appearances as a result of imagining. So in mind, you can imagine yourself to be whatever it is that you desire to be, as all things exist now in imagination. See, the person may be looking to this outer world, and they may be judging by appearances. They may say, this person has done it, so I can do it. That's one way of doing things. But what about things that have never been done before? What about, let's say, if you're an entrepreneur, technologies or products or services that have never appeared here before? They were all first once imagined. The individual thought of these particular inventions from the premise of them already being created in imagination. And they went down, we could say, a journey, or so it appears that way, to reveal what was already there. And they appeared as individuals to play a role in externalizing that invention. This is what is meant by the all is mind, the universe is mental. And just as the all creates universes, you create your own universe. Or more accurately put, you reveal what already exists. So you could say you reveal universes. I like saying that because all has been created. Now, as mentioned, the individual may look to this world and judge by appearances. They may, let's say, based on what they see, what people have done, they can choose to reimagine that from their own perspective. By that I mean, let's say if a person has a particular kind of car and they want to drive that car, they can imagine themselves driving that car. And they end up going through a series of events, or so it appears that way, and they're driving that car. I trust you've experienced this. You may have, as I have as well, once saw a person having a particular kind of life experience, particular kind of relationship, particular kind of business, you name it. And then you imagine yourself, I imagine myself having that kind of experience. And then it happened. Now, the 7 principles articulates what's going on. So that's the first one. And it also gives us a framework to work through what we can call as the creative process. So creation is complete, yet we appear to play a role in actualizing or revealing segments of creation as outer appearances of life. It says, the all creates universes in its own mentality, but your universe is the mental creation of a finite mind. Now we say finite and infinite mind, yet there's no separation. Infinite mind means all possibilities simultaneously existing now, and you can witness them in imagination. Finite mind, we can say we choose to experience a particular event or a particular life experience. And so we individually choose. There are billions of individual minds that all emanate from the all mind. Now, as mentioned earlier, it was referring to depolarizing or neutralization, which essentially means that in a moment of reactivity, where a person, let's say, looks to this world, and as mentioned earlier, a person may look to this world and based on what they're experiencing in this world, choose what appears next. They may say, I would like to have this kind of experience like how this other person is having. Or they can choose an experience that has never appeared before. A particular kind of relationship, a particular invention. They could choose from the infinite possibilities that already exist in imagination. And the person may have beliefs in mind. These beliefs, let's say, the individual perhaps is identified with, from which they judge by appearances in a way that is not in harmony with what they truly desire. And what I mean by that specifically is, let's say a person desires to have wonderful, harmonious relationships in their life. And they would like to have the kind of experience where they go places and they start interacting with people. They engage in harmonious conversations. They flow in their conversations. In their business, for example, they would like to have the kind of conversations in their business where their relationships, let's say with their clients, their team members, their prospects, The conversations are not ones based on illusions of separation, but rather all in harmony. That's essentially what they're looking for. So, in that particular moment, by being neutral to the appearances, if they're about to react, they'll start to notice that the world plays out to be in harmony. Yet, if they react to that particular belief, which we could say they identified with for whatever the reason may be, they may notice that the experience with the people that they're dealing with tend to reflect what they're believing. So, for example, if they identify with a belief that seems to suggest in mine that they're not good enough, then they might have that kind of experience with the people that they're relating with. That's not the kind of experience that they may consciously choose, yet they're having that kind of experience because they have subconsciously chosen that experience based on belief. Now, no shame in condemnation. Let's go into the next part so we can talk about how we can transmute the appearances, as mentioned. The next principle is the principle of correspondence. So, as within, so without, as above, so below. Now that we are aware of what is in mind, as a result of being aware of what we think, what we emotionally relate, and how we behave when it comes to relating with people, environment, circumstance, and information, based on what we think, what we emotionally relate, and our behaviors, we can track back to the belief in mind that is corresponding as that appearance. For example, when I first started public speaking, and I used to teach these workshops back in the days for iris reading, speed reading workshops. When I first started doing it, what corresponded were particular beliefs that I was identified with. And as I am beyond identification, as we discussed earlier, I am aware of what I appear to be identified with as far as belief goes. So one of the beliefs that appeared through the principle of correspondence was that based on particular body language, what people would say, and also emotions, what I was relating to emotions during the experience, I would seem to have these thoughts arise in mind that would suggest that people don't accept me the way that I am, which would then play out as nervousness, overthinking in a way that's not helpful, behaviors that I would look at and they would indicate this identification to this particular belief. And it also appeared to me, I was interpreting it that way, based on what they were doing, etc., for whatever the reason may be. I was interpreting it to be a confirmation of that particular belief. Now, I wasn't aware of this in the beginning, yet I became aware of it as I am aware of, and as you and I know different, I am cannot be divided. You are aware of, as mentioned in the beginning, and can in that moment depolarize, return to that neutral center. As we say, be still. And then upon being still, what I noticed was the appearances changed. Those thoughts of doubt no longer appeared in mind. The way I was emotionally relating to the person was harmonious. behaviors, body language would flow. Everything would naturally flow to externalize the vision that I had of enjoying a wonderful workshop where people benefited greatly from what I was sharing. And I also enjoyed doing that, which appeared as skill cultivation. And by that I mean specifically, as I continue to do this, as I continue to release identification, which, again, all is mind, the universe is mental, so these particular beliefs in mind were being released, what would happen is the experience change to be in harmony with how I truly desired it to be. This was same in my entrepreneurial journey when it came to sales. In the earlier stages, I appeared to be identified with a lot of beliefs surrounding money, sales, that were inharmonious, that were generating these corresponding experiences, which we could say are resistance-based, avoiding making the sales calls, nervousness during the presentation, thinking that people wouldn't accept what it is that I'm offering, even if clearly, logically, I know certainly that it is of benefit for them. And all we're doing is offering them a product or service that can benefit them, and they give us wonderful compensation for it, and everyone benefits greatly. Yet, emotionally, I wasn't experiencing it that way. Thoughts of doubt, uncertainty, and fear would arise in mind. That would reveal the belief that was identified with. The behaviors of nervousness or uncertainty would appear. They would even appear that way as I was interpreting it through the lens of that belief, and it was corresponding accordingly, rather than remaining true to the vision. So again, let's go back to the beginning, what they said. We'll read it again. It says, the advanced hermetist polarizes themselves at the positive pole of their being, the I am pole, rather than the pole of personality. By personality, personality is made up of beliefs. The identity that the individual identifies with is made up of beliefs, and that can be changed. How do we change it? By not identifying, no longer with it. Where are these opportunities presented? To not identify with that false identity construct, that personality that is not in harmony with your authentic way of being and with what you truly desire to experience. Well, in those moments, as mentioned, reactivity. Reactivity presents the opportunity to depolarize by being still. And this may be challenging in the earlier stages, as it was for me. Yet I noticed that it became easier and easier to do it. I noticed then that I was generating the experiences, life experiences in all areas of my life that are what we can call authentic and true life experiences, thus corresponding or revealing, we could say, what we've been calling as heaven on earth. So we can say then, each individual has, as the all has generated infinite universes, each individual has their individual heaven on earth. And what I noticed is my individual heaven on earth corresponds with other individuals' heaven on earth. I noticed this. They would say the same thing. As a matter of fact, in Flow-Based Prosperity, which is my group coaching and mastermind service, some of the members refer to this as the Heaven on Earth Club. I'll link in the description to a conversation we had about that in the description. I trust you've noticed this as well. As you don't identify, as true identity is I am, as you don't identify with that personality construct, that identity construct, which was created through confirmation bias in a way that wasn't helpful for the individual. For example, where did I get those beliefs from about not relating harmoniously to people during interactions, during conversations? Those beliefs were formed in my own mind. I formed those beliefs. So we take responsibility for what we form in mind, and then we surrender the responsibility as creation is complete. Some way, somehow, it happens to be in harmony with how we truly desire it to be. Then we have the principle of vibration. It says, the Hermetic teachings teach that all manifestation of thought, emotion, and reason, will or desire, or any mental state or condition are accompanied by vibrations, a portion of which are thrown off and which tend to affect the minds of other people by induction. This is the principle which produces the phenomena of telepathy, mental influence, and other forms of the action and power of mind over mind. Every thought, emotion, or mental state has its corresponding rate and mode of vibration. And by an effort of the will of the person or of other persons, these mental states may be reproduced just as a musical tone may be reproduced by causing an instrument to vibrate at a certain rate, just as color may be reproduced in the same way. By a knowledge of the principle of vibration, as applied to mental phenomena, one may polarize their mind at any degree they wish, thus gaining a perfect control over their mental states, moods, etc. In the same way, they may affect the minds of people, producing the desired mental states in them. In short, they may be able to produce on the mental plane that which science produces on the physical plane, namely vibrations at will. This power, of course, may be acquired only by the proper instruction, exercises, practices, etc. The science being that of mental transmutation, one of the branches of the Hermetic art. So as mentioned, what inspired me to reveal the book, the Kybalion, back in the days, I've been applying this information now since 2004. We actually have done a number of discussions on the Kybalion. I'll link the description to it. As I continue to practice this, and I trust you have noticed it as well, you continue to understand this more so in a way that's practical. So in the earlier stages, transmutation, I was able to take one energy and transmute it into a different experience, creative expression. What I also noticed was, as I was engaging in conversations, when, let's say, if the individual feels that the emotions are tense between the two individuals, that can be an opportunity to practice transmutation. And it appears as thought transmission. So it appears that way, or telepathy. It appears as the other person changing to correspond your mental state. So for example, a tense conversation, as I am aware of what I think in relation to the person, as I am aware of what I emotionally relate to the other person, as I am aware of my behaviors towards the other person, with the other person, I can in that moment know what is going on in mind that is corresponding accordingly. And I change my mental state. How do you change your mental state? Well, you can imagine yourself having a particular conversation with that person in a way that goes mutually harmonious. And sure enough, the conversation appears to change. The way I relate to the emotions begin to change. The emotions are not suppressed or repressed. They are transmuted, transmutation. And you feel it emotionally. You actually feel that emotionally you relate to emotions one way, perhaps anxiety. And then after mental transmutation, by accessing that state in imagination, what happens is you experience the interaction with the person differently in relation to what you imagine. Now, what I found is a person may doubt this. See, I am beyond doubt. It's only the person, the personality, the beliefs that make up the personality that spawn thoughts of doubt in mind, not here. Do you see doubt anywhere here? The world is neutral. It is what the individual is relating to the world that determines what appears next. And as mentioned, this may be challenging for some individuals in the earlier stages, and that's okay, because consider this, as we've been discussing. Challenge is where we can step into the flow. As Mihai Csikszentmihalyi I talked about in the book Flow, which we discussed recently as well. It's in the playlist, which this video is included in. So are the other videos that I've shared with respect to books that have been helpful for me on my entrepreneurial journey, communication skills, harmonious relationships, etc. Included in the description. He mentioned that a person can get into the flow at opportunity points, which they call challenge, where challenge meets skill, specifically, he said. So you have the opportunity in these kinds of moments to transmute the energy by taking these opportunities. And you get better at it with practice. I found that in particular experiences where I thought it may be very challenging or impossible, let's say, which is an illusion, that I would be able to transmute the experience in this relationship, I developed the ability to do it. I noticed this in my romantic relationships, personal relationships, family relationships, business relationships. In business, for example, this can translate into acquiring more clients. In relationships, this can translate into wonderful relationship experiences. Principle of vibration. As Nikola Tesla said, think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. And you know the secrets of the universe. So, in relation to that, the way it works out, the mysterious ways it works out, is in our favor as we reclaim the ability which we always have, it just, we could say, is an illusion to think we don't have it, to choose our mental states, from which it corresponds accordingly. And the vibrations, the behaviors, phenomena that we might consciously know of, including the unknown aspects, the unseen aspects that animate everything, the unseen aspects, like the vibrations, they take care of everything for you. That's the way I like to say it. They take care of everything for you. Principle of polarity, number 4. It says everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. Extremes meet. A practical example would be, let's say a person is having a conversation with someone. They're engaging in the conversation. The other person uses a particular word or says something, or uses a particular statement, or says it in a particular way. The other person becomes polarized to what that person said in a way where they change their mental state to, let's say, one which they can call undesirable. which is not what they consciously did. That happened as a result of identification to a particular belief. So the individual is assigning meaning to the words, whether they're aware of it or not. Now you are aware of it. So in that moment, they could simply release identification to what they associated that changed their state into a state that they could say is not one that they would consciously choose, into a more favorable state, and the conversation flows. This is another great opportunity that we have with respect to communication skills is, oh my goodness, is it an eagle or a hawk? It's a hawk. I have never, in all my years of walking around in Toronto, have I seen a hawk before. Fascinating. I'll consider that to be a synchronicity. How cool is that? We always have so much fun on our walks, and we always see interesting things. The other day, the synchronicity with the two jets. I'll link a description to that video. All right, so let's continue. You're having a conversation with someone. They're saying a lot of things. You can choose what to expand upon based on all the things that they are saying. Let's say they say 10 sentences, and 8 of them you don't want to identify with, and 2 of them you would like to explore further. Rather than becoming reactive and entering into a mental state, which then the individual focuses on what that person said in those other 8 sentences, rather than doing that, you choose to focus on the 2 sentences that they said. Like, for example, in sales, we choose to focus on opportunity points to convert the prospect into a client, provided that the product or service is beneficial for them. If we focus on those areas in the conversation, we can expand upon it, and then it appears to move towards a harmonious deal. Same thing in relationships. They could choose to focus on what they're relating to what the person said in a way that changes their state into a state that doesn't feel authentic, or they can depolarize and choose to focus on what the individual is communicating that happens to be in mutual harmony and benefit. And like with all these things we're talking about, you get better at it with practice. Let's actually walk over to that bridge over there. I like that bridge. So again, we'll go back to the beginning. By being still, you can depolarize, be completely neutral, true way of being. And you can then choose from there. Depolarize first and then choose from there. Imagine yourself living the kind of life or having the kind of experience that you desire. That's how you enter into that state. And then corresponding to that state, things appear to change. People appear to change. Environments appear to change. It appears that way, somehow. And through the principle of vibration, things also appear to change. And what I also like about the principle of vibration is you can feel what you are identified with. We could say what vibration you are identified with. Now, in the earlier stages, this seemed too abstract for me, too esoteric for me, yet it started to make more sense because, for example, when I was in environments, when I'm in conversations with people, based on what I feel, I know what's going on around me and I can adjust accordingly. So this is the key. You have all the power to adjust accordingly. And these vibrations, as mentioned, also may play a role in what appears as telepathy, people changing their mind. I trust you've noticed this as well. For me, practically speaking, I notice that as I can feel the vibration of the conversation, when I adjust my vibration to relate to a particular state, people start to appear to say those same things that I'm imagining in that state, real time. It's very fascinating. So I'd actually like to relate this back to the start of the video now, before we continue. Remember how I said that who you truly are, I am, is beyond identification? And you can choose your mental states, you can choose your moods, you can choose what you think, what you relate, and you are also aware of what you think, what you emotionally relate, your behaviors, and understand what you appear to be identified with and choose accordingly. Well, I recommend a regular practice of depolarizing. And one of the ways that I found to practice this more often is in conversations, in communication. So I actively place myself in a lot of communication opportunities. It could be sales presentations, it could be conversations with clients, friends, etc. Online, offline. I place myself in a lot of these opportunities each day. And one of the reasons why I do this in relation to what we're talking about here with respect to polarity is I practice during these conversations, during these interactions, depolarizing as applicable. Depolarizing as applicable. As in, if I notice that I appear to about to be reactive to what a person says, their body language, voice tonality, group of people, I know what state, I know what belief I would be identifying with. And I know if it's helpful or not. So your ability to be present during circumstances which we can say in the earlier stages was challenging for me. Maybe some might consider public speaking chaotic environment. These particular points are opportunities to practice this. How exciting is this? As a matter of fact, you can practice this by creating YouTube videos. Because I've coached many people to build successful YouTube channels, and what I have noticed is when they became successful, and not just YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, when they became successful, when the appearances of success were there, we could say what the individual would say, now I achieve this point. And that's relative too, because you could say there's infinity levels and the individual defines what success means. I like what Earl Nightingale said, success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. In The Strangest Secret, he said that. I like that. But let's say they have an appearance of success. They will also notice that it reflects the degree of self-acceptance. These individuals that I'm referring to actually saw video making as a spiritual catalyst. As in, if there were opportunity points to reveal what the individual was subconsciously identifying with, which are beliefs, and acknowledging as well, as I had mentioned, you and I are beyond beliefs. So as they took these opportunities, they released identification to these beliefs that were generating subconsciously the appearances of not being comfortable in front of an audience, not being comfortable on camera, not being comfortable of communicating about the topics that they would like to talk about and their style. And as they did this, their authentic style started to flow. They started to do things their way, their style. And people enjoyed that and would actually want to work with them. And what we found universally is that people who chose to work with them would comment about their authenticity, their realness, their naturalness, because they're not pretending, they're not faking, they're being as they are. So we get the opportunity to be as we are in these moments where it appears that we were about to, and even if a person was polarized to something, they can depolarize. And the way we do it is to be still. Just as you can be still in a meditation, you can also be still in an interaction. Even while making a video, for example, if you're walking around, there are moments where, while you're talking, I notice this as well, you can be aware of what you're communicating, and then all of a sudden, thoughts of doubts may appear in mind, emotional reactivity. Be still in the moment. The audience might not even see it, that you're doing it. So you can actually be still while you're flowing. The next is principle of rhythm. It says everything flows in and out, everything has its tides, and all things rise and fall. This pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. Rhythm also helped me in business. I noticed that at certain points, my sales, certain months, the sales were good. And then in other months, the sales weren't up to the standard that I would have liked it to be, let's say. But that was okay because overall, the business succeeded. So there was this rhythm. And that's totally fine. Because what I noticed, and I've helped many entrepreneurs with this, is there were particular months during the year where they noticed patterns where they would focus more on sales, and then the other months, they would focus more on optimizing their operations. So rather than saying the sales need to be this way all throughout the year in order to feel happy, in order to succeed, which is an illusion, because that's a condition, they actually, practically speaking, value the Kybalion, like we're talking about here, and principle of rhythm, by choosing what to do at each of those particular months. And then they end up achieving their business success from a state of flow, rather than being frustrated by the appearances. The principle of cause and effect, number 6. It says every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause, everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. So the way I relate to this is, even if I don't know how there is a cause and effect relationship to an experience, that's okay. Now is where all the power is to choose what state I would like to embody, the kind of experience that I would like to have next. And this is so wonderful. For example, I've taught this to some of my clients with respect to dating. They would meet people and they would go on dates and they would like to go on a second or third date with this person, but the person appeared to reject them, let's say. The person appeared to not be interested in them. And what I taught them was to be neutral to it. In the earlier stages, they found it challenging to accept this, yet when they accepted it, it worked out in their favor. What I mean by that is, if they want to go on a date with you, the second or third date, great. If not, great. Nothing changes who you are. I am love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment. If you are about to polarize to that, that is not really you. That is just identification being revealed to be released. In other words, the appearance or that experience of a person not wanting to go on a date with you doesn't define you in an inharmonious way. What they then noticed was their relationships changed. They started to have more dates, more harmonious relationships, and things began to flow a lot easier for them in their favor. And they might not know what, they might be looking to this world and saying, what is the cause of this person not wanting to go on a second or third date with me? And actually what they used to do was they would argue with this person They would try to convince this person, try to control the person to go on a date with them. And what is being proposed here is we change our relationship to the experience, and then the relationship and the experience and the appearances change. So what they were doing instead was they were spinning their wheels, they were getting confused, and they couldn't understand the cause and effect relationship. Yet, when they released identification to that particular belief that was generating all those convoluted behaviors, untrue thinking patterns, emotional turmoil, their emotions became regulated, their behaviors flowed. Practically speaking, they enjoyed wonderful dates. Some even had more dates because that's what they wanted. Some had the relationship appear that they desired as a result of the dating bridge of incidents. Things worked out in their favor by acknowledging that although we might not know the cause and effect relationship, we can call it chance if we would like. Yet, what I have found is that throughout the journey from experience, you start to see the relationship between the experience and what was either consciously or subconsciously chosen. And while it might not be apparent in the earlier stages, as it wasn't for me, to get into this kind of nuances, like, for example, what I shared with them, it became crystal clear and obvious through life experience. As mentioned, I've been working with this information since I discovered it in 2004 through Think and Grow Rich. So they were actually able to transmute. And in relation to what Napoleon Hill had mentioned about sexual transmutation, they were able to, while having that desire to be with that person, they were not attached to the outcome at the same time, which is interesting. You can have a desire, and that desire can inspire you like it does for artists. Like, for example, desire inspires me to make these videos and enjoy these conversations with you. Because if I never had a desire to make these videos, I wouldn't make these videos, and then we wouldn't benefit from our conversations. Yet, I am detached from outcome. I don't try to control things. I allow the energy to flow. And things flow in a harmonious ratio of doing, appearing to do, and not do. And there are times where I do something, I take a step. And there are times where I don't do anything. That flows naturally as mind is purified through valuing the previous principles, which relates harmoniously to our next principle, the principle of gender. They say the word gender is derived from the Latin root meaning to generate. The masculine principle of mind corresponds to the so-called objective mind, conscious mind, voluntary mind, active mind, etc. And the feminine principle of mind corresponds to the so-called subjective mind, subconscious mind, involuntary mind, passive mind. They were speaking about different ways that were describing the principle of gender that we see in various schools of thought. And they say the part of the masculine principle seems to be that of directing a certain inherent energy toward the feminine principle, and thus starting into activity the creative process. But the feminine principle is the one always doing the active creative work, and this is so in all planes. And yet, each principle is incapable of operative energy without the assistance of the other. So when it comes to generating, as mentioned, generating, I like that word, generating. The kind of experiences that you would like to have, it is helpful to know when to act, when not to act. And the most helpful way to know this, I have found, is by not overthinking it. It is by being in flow. flow is a reconciliation. It's a reconciliation between masculine and feminine energy. It reconciles automatically while you're in flow, which is why I always teach make flow a priority. And it doesn't necessarily mean 50-50, 50% masculine, 50% feminine. The answer is it depends on the individual style. So practically speaking, how does this play out? As mentioned, sometimes I may do something. Sometimes I may not. Sometimes I be still. Sometimes I imagine what implies. Sometimes I allow things to happen, allow things to appear. And as mentioned, rather than overthinking when to do, what to do, how to do it, we allow things to happen naturally while you're in flow. Now, this is very powerful when it comes to relationships and also harmonious romantic relationships, synchronicity. There's a couple right there. So harmonious relationships that flow naturally, like a dance, I find happened easier and more natural for me as I made flow a priority. So dates appeared to flow, conversations appeared to flow, physical experiences appear to flow. There's a natural flow that happens as a person remains in their flow. So here's the thing about flow that I found. Flow is our natural way of being. As mentioned, what polarizes a person to a particular appearance or experience or degree between the two in a way that becomes rigid and controlling and manipulative, let's say, which is not intentional of the person. It's happening through identification. What is generating those kinds of appearances, again, not consciously, because the individual doesn't consciously choose that, at least I don't consciously choose that, is what is being brought to awareness, which is the identification. They can release that identification, and then they remain in their flow. You may hear me say sometimes, I like to transmute flow restrictors into flow enhancers. That is what we do in flow-based prosperity. We talk about this in our sessions. That's what I've been doing with my clients for years. That's what I've been doing with myself for years, is transmuting flow restrictors into flow enhancers by acknowledging that all is mind and that these flow restrictors are a result of beliefs in mind which can be released so that I could consciously choose from the infinite possibilities in imagination the kind of experience I would like to have. And I can do this each step on the journey to actualizing my vision. Each step, I can do this. You could do this as well. It was, as mentioned, challenging in the earlier stages, yet it got easier and easier with practice. So as these identifications were released by being still, through auto-suggestion, through self-talk, through emotional release, there are many ways of doing it. There are many modalities. Choose the one that works best for you, or as I like to do it, I like to mix and match them because I find that some, for whatever the reason may be, are more effective in some situations, whereas in other situations, I find the other ones to be more effective. We actually discussed this in the conversation we had with Ruben Brooks' clients, one of my clients, who built his business to success. I'll link in the description to it. He invited me to speak at his event. We discussed it extensively there, and I trust you'll find that to be very helpful. So as identification is released, it is easier for the individual to remain in their flow because, practically speaking, they don't react to appearances. It's easier for them to, if they're about to react to something, to be still. They'll notice that that happens automatically, and body flows automatically. Body is animated by spirit. that does everything for you in a way that happens to be in harmony with all, a flow-based way to actualizing the vision, which then the individual knows what to do, what not to do, what to say, what not to say, when to take a step forward, when to take a step back, when to imagine, when to allow what has been imagined to appear. And there's no confusion. There's no confusion while you're in flow. As a matter of fact, that's another thing that Mihai Csikszentmihalyi talked about in his book Flow, is he said that while in flow, while in a state of flow, there's no doubt, uncertainty, confusion in mind, no overthinking. None of that. None of that in mind. Body flows, everything appears to flow in harmony with you to actualize your vision. Well, this was a fun conversation. Thank you very much for joining me today. I trust you benefited greatly from today's articulations on the wonderful book, The Kybalion. As mentioned, this is part of a series of discussions that I've been doing on books that have been very helpful for me to build 3 successful businesses, ideal harmonious relationships, communication skills. And this book right here, inspired by the Hermetic teachings of ancient Egypt and Greece. Let's go back to the beginning. I am. That is immortality. The 2 gifts, you have them, mind and speech. And with the 2 gifts, you can generate the appearances, the experiences of life from the infinite possibilities that already exist, that are accessible in imagination. And on the journey, once you've accepted the end, you can depolarize to any identification to appearances that is not in harmony with your vision. And everything appears to change. And as you do that, mind is purified so that everything flows. All these principles, which could sound like a whole bunch of theoretical conjecture, are actually lived experientially. You experientially embody these principles as a natural way of being. At that point, you're flowing. And as you're flowing, as mentioned, something interesting also happens, self-transcendence, which means that you experience one with the all. And that's profound as well. It is experienced as being in harmony with all people, all environments, oneness, a sense of calm, peace, joy, bliss, fulfillment, which is why I always say I am equals love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment, as that is your true nature. So I trust you found this to be helpful. Let's conclude this with an auto-suggestion to integrate all the principles. You could say, I acknowledge that all is mine, thus reality is in my favor, as I am whole, complete, and perfect now. Thus I imagine the ideal life, which corresponds as the outer appearances of people, environment, circumstance, and information appearing to be in harmony with me, as I am aware of what I relate to appearances, and choose that which is in harmony with my highest vibration, knowing that I am at the highest vibration, experiencing the true cause I am as love, happiness, peace, bliss, fulfillment, appearing as the outer appearances from a state of flow, as I appear to flow in harmony with people, environment, circumstance, to reveal my universe to be heaven on earth.